Captain Marcus Chen stared at the tactical display with growing unease. The red dots representing enemy Zephyrian vessels formed a loose perimeter around the prison transport, their sleek ships moving in perfect formation like predators circling wounded prey. Intelligence had been wrong about the escort's size. Instead of 3 light cruisers, they were looking at a full battle group. 12 ships, including 2 heavy destroyers that could punch through his frigate's shields in minutes. "Sir, we should aboard," Lieutenant Sarah Kim whispered from the navigation console, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "There's no way we can extract the prisoner with that much firepower protecting the transport." Marcus nodded slowly, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his command chair. The smart play was to retreat, report the increased security, and wait for reinforcements. That's what Admiral Harrison would do. That's what the manual recommended. That's what any sane captain would choose. But Marcus wasn't thinking about manuals or admirals or even his own crew's safety. His mind kept returning to the intelligence briefing 3 days ago, to the grainy photograph of the Zephyrian prisoner being dragged from the wreckage of her fighter craft. Commander Liara Vex, they called her, a decorated warrior who had spent the last 2 years conducting surgical strikes against human supply lines. By all accounts, she was a dangerous enemy combatant who deserved whatever fate awaited her in Zephyrian hands. The problem was the fear in her eyes, even through the poor image quality, even across the vast cultural divide between their species. Marcus had recognized that look. He'd seen it before, in the mirror, during his own stint as a prisoner of war. The hollow gaze of someone who knew they were going to die slowly and painfully, far from home and forgotten by those they'd served. "Captain?" His communications officer, Ensign Davies, was looking at him expectantly. "Admiral Harrison is requesting our status." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. In 6 years of service, he'd never disobeyed a direct order. His record was spotless, his crew respected him, and he was being considered for promotion to Commodore. One decision could change all of that. "Tell the Admiral we're experiencing communication difficulties," he said finally. Complete radio silence for the next hour. Davies hesitated. "Sir, that's an order, Ensign." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of sensors and the distant thrum of the engines. Marcus could feel his crew's eyes on him, could sense their confusion and growing concern. They'd followed him through 3 major engagements, trusted him with their lives countless times. Now he was about to ask them to risk everything for an enemy prisoner they'd never met. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "What I'm about to propose goes against everything we've been taught about rules of engagement. Any crew member who objects can submit to arrest and remain in quarters until this operation concludes. No questions asked, no mark on your record." He paused, waiting for someone to speak up. No one did. The prisoner aboard that transport is Commander Liara Vex of the Zephyrian Defense Corps. Intelligence suggests she possesses critical information about enemy fleet movements. More importantly, she's a living being who doesn't deserve to be tortured to death for doing her duty. His voice hardened. "We're going in." "Sir," Lieutenant Kim spoke up, her voice steadier now. "The crew stands ready. What are your orders?" Marcus allowed himself a small smile. This was why he loved his crew. They might question his sanity, but they'd follow him into hell if he asked them to. "We need a distraction," he said, bringing up a tactical overlay on the main screen. "Something big enough to pull most of their escorts away from the transport, but not so obvious that they suspect a rescue attempt."
Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room.
"Emergency plasma dump, lots of radiation signatures. They'd have to investigate. Could be a prelude to a kamikaze attack." "Brilliant," Marcus replied. "How long do you need to make it convincing? Give me 20 minutes to rig the plasma relays. I can create a light show that'll register on their sensors from 3 systems away." While Rodriguez worked his magic and engineering, Marcus studied the enemy formation more carefully. The prison transport was an older model Zephyrian vessel, heavily armored but lightly armed. It held position at the center of the formation while the escort ships patrolled in a complex pattern that would make any direct approach suicidal. Zephyrians were logical beings, driven by efficiency and order. Their military tactics reflected this philosophy, precise, calculated, and devastatingly effective against conventional opponents. But humans had never been particularly conventional. "Davies, I need you to hack into the transport's communications array," Marcus said. "Can you create a false distress signal from inside their ship?" The young ensign's fingers flew over his console. "Already on it, sir. I can simulate life support failures, structural damage, even crew casualties. What do you want them to think is happening?" Make it look like their prize prisoner is dying, Marcus replied grimly. Sudden illness, maybe an allergic reaction to something in their atmosphere. They'll want to keep her alive for interrogation, so they'll have to choose between medical evacuation and maintaining their defensive perimeter. Sir, what if they just let her die? Kim asked. Marcus shook his head. They won't. Commander Vex is too valuable. She knows too much about human fleet positions and strategic planning. They'll take the risk. For the next 15 minutes, the bridge was a flurry of quiet activity. Rodriguez completed his sabotage of the plasma relays, creating what appeared to be an imminent reactor failure. Davies planted false medical alerts throughout the transport's computer system. Kim plotted a course that would take them directly through the heart of the enemy formation at maximum burn. When everything was ready, Marcus stood from his command chair and looked around at his crew. They were young, most of them, barely out of the academy and full of the kind of idealism that peace treaties and bureaucracy had a tendency to crush. But right now, in this moment, they were exactly what humanity needed them to be. Execute, he ordered. The first phase went perfectly. Rodriguez's simulated reactor breach lit up every sensor within 50,000 kilometers, creating a brilliant cascade of radiation that looked exactly like a ship in its death throes. 8 of the 12 escort vessels immediately broke formation, racing toward what they believed was a crippled human frigate attempting a desperate final attack. Phase 2 was even more successful. Davies' medical alerts triggered emergency protocols aboard the transport, and Marcus watched with satisfaction as the ship's escort was reduced to just 2 light cruisers and a destroyer. Then everything went wrong. Sir, they're not taking the bait, Kim reported, her voice tight with stress. The remaining escorts are tightening formation around the transport instead of investigating the medical emergency. Marcus frowned at the tactical display. The Zephyrian commander was smarter than he'd expected, or perhaps more paranoid. Either way, 3 heavily armed ships still stood between them and their target. New plan, he said quickly. We go in hard and fast. Kim, plot an intercept course directly for the transport. Davies, prepare a targeted EMP burst. I want those escorts disabled, not destroyed. Sir, that puts us in the middle of a crossfire, Kim protested. Even if we disable their weapons, the blast will take out our shields too. Then we'll have to be faster than they are, Marcus replied grimly. He activated the ship-wide intercom again. All hands brace for combat. This is gonna get rough. The attack run was a thing of beauty and terror. Marcus's frigate, the USS Defiant, streaked through space like a comet, engines pushed beyond safe operational limits. The remaining Zephyrian escorts opened fire immediately, their energy weapons painting brilliant lines of destruction across the void. Kim threw the ship into a spiraling dive that would have made a fighter pilot sick, dodging the worst of the incoming fire while keeping them on course for the transport. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles as enemy fire found its mark, but the ship held together. MP burst in 3 seconds, Davies announced. 2, 1... Firing! The electromagnetic pulse erupted from the Defiant's forward array like a miniature star, washing over the enemy formation in a wave of disruptive energy. Systems failed across all 3 escort ships, their weapons falling silent as emergency lighting flickered to life on their hulls. Direct hit on the transport's docking bay, Kim reported. We're going in. The docking maneuver was controlled chaos. With their shields down and enemy reinforcements racing back from the false reactor breach, they had perhaps 5 minutes before the situation became completely untenable. Marcus felt the ship shudder as magnetic clamps engaged, sealing them to the transport's hull. Boarding party, with me, he ordered, grabbing the pulse rifle from the weapons locker beside his chair. Kim, you have the bridge. If we're not back in 4 minutes, get the hell out of here. Sir, you should stay with the ship, Lieutenant Torres, his security chief protested. Let us handle the extraction. Marcus shook his head. This was my call. I'm not sending anyone else to die for my conscience. The boarding tube pressurized with a hiss, and Marcus led his team into the Zephyrian transport. The ship's corridors were dimly lit and filled with the acrid smell of burned electronics from the EMP blast. Emergency klaxons wailed in the distance, and he could hear the sound of crew members shouting in the musical Zephyrian language. They moved quickly but carefully through the ship, following blueprints Davies had pulled from intelligence databases. The detention level was 3 decks down, past what appeared to be crew quarters and a small armory that Torres quickly secured. Motion sensors are picking up multiple contacts, Corman Hayes whispered, checking his handheld scanner. Looks like they're trying to organize some kind of response. How long? Marcus asked. 2 minutes, maybe less. They found the detention level without encountering resistance, which Marcus found troubling. Zephyrians were fierce fighters when cornered, and their absence suggested either a trap or something worse. The detention bay was a single large room filled with energy cages, most of them empty. Commander Liara Vex occupied the center cage, and Marcus felt his breath catch when he saw her. The intelligence photos hadn't captured the sheer presence of the Zephyrian warrior. She was tall, even by the standards of her species, with the characteristic pale blue skin and silver hair that marked her as nobility. Her eyes were the color of deep ocean water, and they fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like prey being evaluated by a predator.
"Human soldiers," she said in accented but perfectly clear English.
"Have you come to gloat, or do you intend something more direct?" "We're here to get you out," Marcus replied, studying the energy cage's control mechanism. "Can you walk?" For a moment, Lyra looked genuinely confused. "You are rescuing me?" "That's the plan." "Torres, can you break this containment field?" "Give me 30 seconds. The security chief replied, pulling out a portable decryption device. Liara stood slowly, and Marcus could see she'd been badly beaten. Her left arm hung at an odd angle, and there were fresh burns on her neck that suggested torture. Despite her injuries, she moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. "Why?" she asked simply. Marcus met her gaze. "Because it's the right thing to do. Your species and mine are at war. That doesn't mean we have to be monsters." The cage's energy field flickered and died, and Liara stepped out cautiously. She was even taller than Marcus had thought, at least 6.5 feet. And despite her injuries, she radiated dangerous competence. "Contact incoming," Hayes announced. "Full squad of Zephyrian Marines, heavily armed." "This way," Marcus said, leading them toward an emergency maintenance shaft that bypassed the main corridors. "Can you climb?" Lyra nodded grimly. "I can do whatever is necessary to leave this place." The maintenance shaft was a tight fit for humans. For a Zephyrian of Lyra's size, it was nearly impossible. But she pulled herself along without complaint, even with her injured arm. Behind them, Marcus could hear the sound of energy weapons as the Zephyrian Marines discovered the empty detention bay. They emerged on the deck where they docked to find Kim's voice crackling over their communication devices. "Captain, enemy reinforcements are 2 minutes out. We need to go now." The run back to the Defiant was a nightmare of narrow corridors and emergency lighting. Twice they had to duck into side passages as Zephyrian crew members rushed past. Once they had to climb over a pile of debris where the EMP blast had caused a structural collapse. When they finally reached the docking tube, Marcus felt a moment of pure relief. The Defiant's engines were already warming up, ready for immediate departure. He gestured for his team to board first, then turned to Liara. "After you." She paused at the threshold between ships, looking back at him with those haunting blue eyes. "You risked your career for this. Your life."
"Your crew's lives."
"I still do not understand why," Marcus smiled tiredly. "Maybe someday I'll figure that out myself." Before Marcus could react, she pulled him close and bit down hard on his shoulder, her sharp canine teeth easily penetrating the fabric of his uniform. Pain shot through his arm, but what surprised him more was the way her saliva seemed to burn against his skin, creating a sensation that was equal parts agony and electricity. "What the hell?" Torres shouted, raising his weapon. Liara released Marcus and stepped back, her eyes wide with what looked like shock. "By the void," she whispered. "It cannot be." Marcus pressed a hand to his shoulder, feeling warmth spread through his bloodstream from the bite wound. "What did you do?" But Lara just stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, fear, and something that might have been wonder. "Captain, we need to get out of here," Kim's voice called from the bridge. As the docking clamps released and the Defiant pulled away from the Zephyrian transport, Marcus found himself looking back at Lyra, trying to understand what had just happened. The bite mark on his shoulder was already beginning to heal, but he could feel something changing in his blood, something that definitely wasn't human. And from the way Lyra was staring at him, she felt it too. The medical bay of the USS Defiant had never hosted a Zephyrian before, and Dr. Elena Vasquez was making that abundantly clear through her constant stream of complaints. She'd been scanning both Marcus and Liara for the past 3 hours, muttering in Spanish and occasionally throwing her hands up in frustration. "Captain, I need you to explain to me one more time why an alien prisoner bit you, and why you're not dead from whatever toxins might be in her saliva," she said, waving her medical scanner like an accusatory finger. Marcus sat on the edge of an examination table, rolling his shoulder experimentally. The bite mark had completely healed within an hour of their escape from the transport, leaving only a faint silvery scar that seemed to shimmer in the medical bay's bright lights. More troubling was the way he could feel Liara's presence, even through the containment field that separated her examination area from his. I don't know any more than you do, Doc, he replied. She bit me. It hurt for about 10 minutes, then it stopped hurting. End of story. That is not the end of the story, Liara interjected from behind her containment field. She'd been uncharacteristically quiet since coming aboard, speaking only when directly questioned. Now she sat perfectly straight on her own examination table, watching Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. What I did, it should not have been possible. Dr. Stark, Vasquez looked between them with growing exasperation. Someone needs to start explaining things in terms I can understand. I'm a doctor, not a xenobiologist. Lara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a resignation in her expression that hadn't been there before. Among my people, there is an ancient bonding ritual. It has not been performed in over 2 centuries, not since we learned to control our more primitive impulses. The bonding creates a permanent connection between 2 individuals, linking their life forces in ways that your science cannot measure. Permanent connection? Marcus repeated, not liking where this was heading. The bond cannot be broken, Lyra continued. Not by distance, not by time, not even by death. When one dies, the other follows within hours. It is considered the highest form of commitment among Zephyrians, reserved for lifemates who choose to share not just their lives, but their very existence. Dr. Vasquez's scanner clattered to the floor. Are you telling me that you've somehow married my captain to an alien warrior princess? I am not royalty, Liara said stiffly, and the concept of marriage is inadequate to describe what has occurred. Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. But you said this ritual hadn't been performed in centuries. How did it happen accidentally? Lyra's blue skin darkened to a deeper shade, which Marcus was beginning to recognize as the Zephyrian equivalent of a blush. It was not entirely accidental. In the moment when you freed me, when I realized that you had risked everything to save someone you had never met, I felt the ancient stirring that my people call soul recognition, the understanding that I had found the one being in the universe whose essence complemented my own. Dr. Vasquez asked incredulously. The bonding ritual is not a conscious choice, Liara explained patiently. It is an instinctive response to finding one's true mate. The bite exchanges genetic material and creates a chemical bond that links our nervous systems. It only works if both individuals are genuinely compatible at a biological level. Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a spectacular headache. So what you're saying is that not only did I commit an act of treason to rescue you, but now we're magically married, and if one of us dies, the other goes too? That is essentially correct. Captain, Doctor. Vasquez interrupted. I'm detecting some unusual readings in both your blood samples. Lyra's biology appears to be adapting to match some of your physiological markers and vice versa. Heart rate, brainwave patterns, even hormone levels are beginning to synchronize. Is that dangerous? Marcus asked. I have no idea. This is completely outside my area of expertise. She pulled up a holographic display showing their comparative biometrics. But whatever this bonding process is, it's definitely real and it's happening fast. A chime from the bridge communication system interrupted their conversation. Captain Chen to the bridge immediately, came Lieutenant Kim's voice. We have incoming transmissions from Admiral Harrison, and he doesn't sound happy. Marcus sighed and stood up. The Admiral's anger was the least of his problems right now, but he still had a ship to command and a crew to protect. Doc, keep monitoring both of us. I want to know immediately if anything changes. What about her? Vasquez gestured toward Liara. Do I keep her sedated? Restrained? Marcus looked at the Zephyrian warrior who was watching him with those deep blue eyes. He could feel something stirring in the back of his mind, a presence that definitely wasn't his own thoughts. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was deeply unsettling. No sedation, he decided. And drop the containment field. If we're really bonded like she says, then she's not going to hurt me or my crew. Captain, that might not be wise. Vasquez protested. Perhaps not, Liara said as the energy field dissolved around her, but it is correct. I could no more harm Marcus or his crew than I could cut out my own heart. The bridge was in controlled chaos when Marcus arrived. 6 communications channels were active simultaneously, and the main screen showed tactical displays from 3 different sectors. Admiral Harrison's face occupied the largest display, his expression thunderous. Captain Chen, the Admiral began without preamble, You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why you broke communication protocol, ignored direct orders, and apparently attacked a Zephyrian convoy. Sir, the situation required immediate action, Marcus replied, falling back on military formality. Intelligence regarding the prisoner's value was time-sensitive and... The prisoner? Harrison's voice rose an octave. What prisoner? Our sources indicate the transport was carrying agricultural supplies. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Sir, Commander Liara Vex was being held aboard that vessel. Intelligence briefed us on her strategic importance. Captain, there is no record of any intelligence briefing regarding a Zephyrian prisoner. No record of any authorized rescue mission. And definitely no authorization for you to attack neutral shipping in contested space. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He turned to Lieutenant Kim, who was staring at her console with growing alarm. Kim, pull up the mission briefing from 3 days ago. Her fingers flew over the controls, and stopped. Sir, there's no record of any briefing. According to our logs, we've been on routine patrol for the past week. That's impossible, Marcus said, but even as he spoke, he could feel doubt creeping in. Had he imagined the briefing, the photographs, the urgent need to rescue someone who might not have existed? Captain Chen. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through his confusion like a blade. You are hereby relieved of command pending a full investigation. Lieutenant Kim will assume temporary command and escort your vessel to Starbase Omega for debriefing. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Marcus stared at the blank screen, trying to process what had just happened. His career was over. That much was certain. But more than that, he was beginning to question his own sanity. Sir? Lieutenant Kim's voice was gentle, sympathetic. What are your orders? Before Marcus could respond, the medical bay's emergency klaxon began wailing throughout the ship. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain to medical bay, immediately. We have a problem. Marcus found Dr. Vasquez frantically working at her computer terminal, while Lyra stood nearby, her expression grim. Doc, what's the emergency? The bond, she said without looking up. It's accelerating. Both of your physiologies are changing at an exponential rate. If this continues, you'll both be dead within 6 hours. Dead how? Marcus demanded. Your nervous systems are trying to merge, Dr. Vasquez explained, pulling up a holographic display of 2 intertwined DNA helixes. The process is too rapid for your bodies to adapt. You're essentially rejecting each other at a cellular level while simultaneously becoming dependent on each other for survival. Liara stepped forward, her movements carefully controlled. There may be a way to slow the process, but it would require trust. What kind of trust? Marcus asked warily. Among my people, the bonding process is traditionally completed through shared meditation. Mental synchronization allows the physical changes to proceed more gradually. She paused, studying his face. But it would require me to establish a direct mental link with you. You would experience my thoughts and memories, and I yours. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of sharing his mind with anyone, especially an alien whose motives he didn't fully understand, was terrifying. But the alternative was death for both of them. How do I know this isn't some kind of trick? He asked. Because, Lyra replied simply, if you die, I die. And if I wanted to harm you or your crew, the bond would have killed me already. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console. Captain, I'm detecting increasing neural instability in both of you. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen soon. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. Everything that had happened in the past few hours seemed like a fever dream. The rescue mission that apparently never existed, the intelligence briefing that had no records, the alien warrior who claimed they were now permanently bonded. None of it made sense. But the bite mark on his shoulder was real. The strange presence in the back of his mind was real. And the way his heart rate spiked every time Lyra moved too far away was definitely real. All right, he said finally. What do we need to do? Lyra gestured toward the medical bay's secondary examination room. We need privacy and quiet. The process requires complete mental relaxation. I'll monitor from out here, Dr. Vasquez said. If your vital signs destabilize, I'm pulling you apart whether you like it or not. The examination room was small and dimly lit, barely large enough for 2 people to sit comfortably. Marcus settled himself on one of the medical chairs while Liara took the other, positioning herself so they were facing each other with perhaps 3 feet of space between them. Close your eyes, she instructed, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality. Focus on your breathing, feel the rhythm of your heartbeat. Marcus did as she asked, though every instinct told him this was a mistake. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he could hear the soft whisper of Lyra's breathing, could sense her presence like warmth radiating from a fire. "Now," she said softly, "I need you to think about the moment you decided to rescue me. Not the planning or the briefing, but the actual moment when you chose to risk everything for a stranger." The memory came easily, standing on the bridge, looking at the tactical display, knowing that the smart choice was to retreat. And then thinking about those eyes in the intelligence photo, about the fear and resignation he'd recognized there. "I see it," Liara's voice whispered, though her lips hadn't moved. The words seemed to form directly in his mind. "The compassion that drove you to act against all logic and training. It is remarkable." Marcus felt something brush against his consciousness, gentle but alien. Suddenly he was seeing himself through Lyra's eyes, seeing the moment when he'd first appeared in the detention bay. To her he had looked like an angel of mercy, impossible and wonderful. "Your turn," her mental voice said. "Show me what you saw when you first looked at me." The memory was more recent, but no less vivid. Liara standing in the energy cage, beaten but unbroken, radiating dignity despite her circumstances. The way she'd moved with lethal grace despite her injuries. The intelligence and strength he'd seen in her alien features. "You saw a warrior," came her response, tinged with something that might have been surprise. "Not a monster or an enemy, but someone worthy of respect." The mental connection deepened, and suddenly Marcus was experiencing fragments of Lyra's memories. He saw her childhood on a world of crystalline cities and silver seas, her training in the military academies of the Zephyrian Empire, the bitter campaigns she'd fought against human expansion, always wondering if there might be another way. In return, she experienced his memories of growing up on Earth, of the Academy, of the friends he'd lost in various conflicts. She felt his doubts about the war, his growing conviction that both sides were trapped in a cycle of violence that served no one. "We are more alike than either of our species would care to admit," her mental voice observed. The sharing continued for what felt like hours, though Dr. Vasquez later told them it had been less than 20 minutes. They exchanged childhood fears and adult hopes, professional disappointments and personal triumphs. They shared the loneliness that came with command, the weight of decisions that could cost lives, the secret dreams they'd never dared voice to anyone. Through it all, Marcus could feel the bonds stabilizing, the chaotic cellular changes settling into something more sustainable. His nervous system was learning to accommodate the alien presence, while hers adapted to human patterns. They were becoming something new, something that was neither fully human nor fully Zephyrian. When they finally opened their eyes, Marcus felt fundamentally changed. The presence in his mind was no longer foreign. It was part of him, as natural as his own heartbeat. And when he looked at Liara, he saw not just an alien warrior, but the other half of his soul. "The immediate crisis has passed," Dr. Vasquez announced as they emerged from the examination room. "Your vital signs have stabilized, though I'm detecting some unusual neurological patterns in both of you." "We can hear each other's thoughts," Marcus said, his voice strangely calm. "Not constantly, but when we focus on it. And we share certain memories now," Liara added. "I know things about human culture that I never learned, while Marcus has acquired knowledge of Zephyrian military tactics." Vasquez shook her head in amazement. "This bond of yours is rewriting both your neural architectures. You're essentially becoming a single organism in two bodies." Before anyone could respond, Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we're receiving an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. They're demanding the immediate return of Commander Vex." Marcus and Liara looked at each other, and in that moment, they both knew exactly what they had to do. The rescue mission might have been a mystery, the intelligence briefing might have been imaginary, but the bond between them was real. And it was going to change everything. "Tell them," Marcus said, "that we'd like to arrange a meeting." The neutral space station Haven 7 hung in the void between human and Zephyrian territories like a monument to cautious diplomacy. Built jointly by both species during the brief peace accord of 2387, it served as the only place where humans and Zephyrians could meet without automatically assuming hostile intent. Marcus had never been aboard before, but through Liara's inherited memories, he knew its layout as well as his own ship. "You're certain about this?" Lieutenant Kim asked for the third time as they prepared to disembark. "Once you're on that station, there's no telling what the Zephyrians might do." Marcus adjusted the dress uniform that he'd probably never wear again after this meeting. His naval career was effectively over regardless of how things went, but he wanted to face whatever came next looking like an officer. "I'm certain, Sarah. This is the only way forward. Beside him, Lyra wore the formal robes of a Zephyrian commander that someone had managed to synthesize in the ship's fabrication bay. The deep blue fabric complemented her skin tone and gave her an aura of authority that was both regal and intimidating. But Marcus could feel her nervousness through their bond, a flutter of anxiety that matched his own. "The delegation from my government will not be pleased," she warned as they walked toward the airlock. "Fleet Commander Zarn has been advocating for total war against humanity for years. My capture and bonding to a human will provide him with all the justification he needs." "And Admiral Harrison thinks I've committed treason," Marcus replied. So we're both walking into a hostile audience. The bond between them had stabilized over the past week, settling into something that felt natural rather than intrusive. They could sense each other's emotions and share surface thoughts when they chose to, but their individual personalities remained intact. If anything, the connection had made them both feel more complete rather than less. Dr. Vasquez had run every test she could think of and declared them both in perfect health, despite the fundamental changes to their DNA. Their lifespans had apparently synchronized, meaning they would age at the same rate regardless of their species' different lifespans. More remarkably, they seemed to be developing immunities to diseases that would normally be fatal to their respective species. "You're becoming something new," the doctor had told them. "Not human, not Zephyrian, but something that combines the best traits of both." From a medical standpoint, it's fascinating. From a political standpoint, she hadn't needed to finish that sentence. The implications were staggering. Haven 7's docking bay was larger than anything on the Defiant, designed to accommodate ships from a dozen different species. The Zephyrian delegation's vessel was a sleek diplomatic cruiser that looked more like a work of art than a spacecraft, all flowing curves and crystalline extensions. The human ship was Admiral Harrison's flagship, a massive dreadnought that radiated intimidation from every angular surface. "Quite the contrast," Liara observed as they made their way to the station's conference center. "Our species have very different aesthetic philosophies," Marcus agreed, "though I'm beginning to appreciate the elegance of Zephyrian design." The conference room was a masterpiece of neutral architecture, designed to be equally comfortable for both species. The table was positioned at the exact height that would accommodate both human and Zephyrian physiology, and the lighting could be adjusted to suit either species' visual preferences. Even the air was precisely regulated to be breathable for both groups. Admiral Harrison was already seated when they arrived, flanked by two other officers that Marcus recognized as commanders from the Joint Chiefs. His expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. The Zephyrian delegation entered moments later, and Marcus felt Lyara's tension spike through their bond. Fleet Commander Zarn was exactly what Marcus had expected from Lyara's memories, tall even by Zephyrian standards, with the silver-white hair that marked advanced age and the ritual scars that indicated combat experience. His pale eyes swept over the assembled humans with undisguised contempt. "Admiral Harrison," Zarn spoke in accented but perfect English, "I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. One of your officers has violated every treaty between our peoples by attacking a peaceful transport and kidnapping a member of my fleet." "Commander Zarn," Harrison replied evenly, "I assure you that Captain Chen was acting without authorization. The Human Federation is prepared to make appropriate reparations for this incident." "Reparations?" Zarn's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Your officer has violated the sacred bond right of my subordinate. There can be no reparations for such an act." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Through his connection with Lyra, he could sense that Zarn knew exactly what had happened between them. This wasn't just about a rescue mission gone wrong. This was about the bond itself. "I'm afraid I don't understand," Admiral Harrison said, though his eyes were fixed on Marcus with growing suspicion. "Perhaps," Liara said quietly, rising from her seat, "I should explain." She moved to the center of the room with liquid grace, and Marcus felt a surge of admiration and pride through their bond. Even facing hostile members of her own species and suspicious humans, she radiated calm authority. "Honored Fleet Commander," she addressed Zarn in formal Zephyrian, "I invoke my right as a bonded individual to speak for myself and my mate." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral Harrison turned pale, while Zarn's expression shifted from contempt to something that might have been hunger. "You acknowledge the bond?" Zarn asked. "I do. Captain Marcus Chen of the Human Federation Navy is my chosen lifemate under the ancient laws of our people. The bond was completed 5 days ago and cannot be undone." Admiral Harrison found his voice first. "Captain Chen, please tell me you haven't actually married an alien enemy combatant." "It's more complicated than marriage," Marcus replied, standing to join Liara in the center of the room. "According to Zephyrian law, we're now a single legal entity. What affects one affects the other. Which brings us to the crux of the matter, Zarn interjected smoothly. Under Zephyrian law, any being bonded to one of our citizens becomes a citizen themselves. Captain Chen is now, legally speaking, a member of the Zephyrian Empire. The implications hit Admiral Harrison like a physical blow. You're saying that one of my officers is now technically an enemy citizen? I am saying, Zarn continued with obvious satisfaction, that Captain Chen has access to all of Commander Vex's memories and knowledge, including detailed information about human military capabilities, fleet positions, and strategic planning. Information that now belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Marcus felt Liara's shock through their bond, followed immediately by understanding and horror. This had been planned. Somehow Zarn had orchestrated the entire situation to gain access to human military secrets through the bond. That's impossible, Admiral Harrison protested. The intelligence briefing that prompted this mission was fabricated, Zarn said calmly. My agents have been working within your intelligence services for some time. The photographs, the urgency, the strategic importance of Commander Vex, all carefully crafted to prompt exactly the response we received. You used me, Liara said, her voice deadly quiet. You used my heritage, my ability to form bonds, as a weapon against the humans. I used every tool at my disposal to protect our people, Zarn replied without shame. The bond was always a possibility, given your noble bloodline. We simply created the conditions that would make it most likely to occur with a high-value human target. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. Not just his own, but Liara's as well. The bond amplified their emotions, and the combination of their anger was threatening to overwhelm his self-control. You're saying, he managed through clenched teeth, that everything I felt, everything that drove me to rescue her, was artificially induced? Not artificially induced, Zarn corrected, but carefully encouraged. Your psychological profile indicated a tendency toward protective behavior and moral flexibility. We simply provided the right stimulus. And the memories I don't have? Marcus continued. The intelligence briefing that somehow vanished from all records? Memory modification technology, Zarn explained casually. A simple matter of adjusting your recollection of events to create the necessary motivation. Though I confess, we did not anticipate that you would question the authenticity of those memories so quickly. Admiral Harrison was staring at Marcus with a mixture of horror and pity. My God, Chen. They've been playing you from the beginning. But Marcus wasn't focused on the Admiral. Through his bond with Lyra, he could feel her emotions shifting from shock to fury to something that felt like determination. And underneath it all was a growing sense of satisfaction? Fleet Commander Zarn, Liara said formally, I have a question. Speak. In your careful planning, did you account for the possibility that the bond might work both ways? For the first time, Zarn looked uncertain. What do you mean? You assumed that bonding with a human would give us access to his memories and knowledge, but did you consider that he would gain access to mine? Liara's voice carried a dangerous edge. Including my memories of this conspiracy? The color drained from Zarn's pale blue face. That would be treason, Liara finished. Conspiracy to commit acts of war against a treaty partner. Manipulation of sacred bonding rituals for political gain. Use of classified memory modification technology on civilians. She turned to address Admiral Harrison. All of which Marcus now knows in perfect detail thanks to the bond that was supposed to compromise human security, Marcus smiled grimly. Through Liara's memories, he could see the full scope of Zarn's conspiracy. Names, dates, operational details, the locations of Zephyrian agents within human space, information that could cripple the conspiracy and potentially prevent the war that Zarn was trying to start. Moreover, Liara continued, the sacred nature of the bond means that any attempt to coerce or manipulate either partner is a capital offense under Zephyrian law. The punishment is immediate. Exile and loss of citizenship. Zarn's carefully controlled expression cracked. You cannot invoke ancient laws that have not been enforced in centuries. I am bonded to a citizen of the Human Federation, Liara replied formally. Under the mutual defense clauses of the bonding laws, any attack on my mate is an attack on me. Any attack on me is an attack on the Zephyrian Empire. You have deliberately placed the Empire at risk of civil war to pursue your personal agenda. Admiral Harrison was looking back and forth between them with growing amazement. Are you saying that this bond gives you some kind of legal authority? Among our people, bonded pairs are considered to speak with one voice, Lyra explained. Their legal status is elevated. We can invoke emergency powers in defense of the Empire's interests. And I'm guessing, Marcus said, feeling pieces click into place, that preventing an unjust war would fall under that category? Indeed. Liara turned back to Zarn, her posture shifting into something that looked distinctly royal. Fleet Commander Zarn, by the authority vested in me as a bonded descendant of the Imperial House, I hereby place you under arrest for treason against the Zephyrian Empire. Your forces will stand down immediately. This is preposterous, Zarn sputtered. You have no such authority. Actually, came a new voice from the conference room's entrance, she does. Everyone turned to see a new Zephyrian entering the room, older than Zarn, with the elaborate facial markings that indicated membership in the Imperial Court. Marcus felt Lyra's surprise through their bond, followed by relief and something that might have been hope. High Magistrate Keth, Lyra said formally, I did not expect to see you here. When word reached the Imperial Court that a member of the noble houses had formed a bond, the Emperor dispatched me to observe the situation personally. The magistrate's pale eyes fixed on Zarn. What I have heard today is most disturbing. Your Excellency, Zarn began, you must understand that... I understand that you have manipulated sacred rituals for military gain, Keth interrupted. I understand that you have violated treaty obligations with our human allies. And I understand that your actions have placed the Empire at risk of internal conflict. He gestured to two guards who had entered behind him. You will return with me to face judgment. As Zarn was led away, still protesting his innocence, High Magistrate Keth turned to address the remaining delegates. The Imperial Court extends its apologies for this incident. Fleet Commander Zarn's actions were unauthorized and do not represent the will of the Zephyrian people. Admiral Harrison found his voice. What does this mean for Captain Chen and Commander Vex? That, Keth replied, remains to be determined. The bond between them is legitimate, regardless of how it was initiated. Under Zephyrian law, they are now considered a single entity, with citizenship in both the Empire and the Federation. Dual citizenship? Marcus mused. That's got to be a first. Indeed. Which is why the Emperor has asked me to propose something unprecedented. Keth activated a holographic projector, displaying what appeared to be an official document. A new treaty between our peoples, one that recognizes the unique status of bonded individuals and establishes them as official ambassadors between our species. Marcus felt Lyra's excitement through their bond, along with their sudden understanding of the possibilities this represented. They wouldn't just be two individuals caught between warring species, they would be the foundation for a new kind of relationship between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. You're asking us to become diplomats? Marcus asked. I am asking you to become something that has never existed before, Keth replied. A bridge between species, a living symbol of cooperation rather than conflict. Admiral Harrison was shaking his head. The political implications alone are substantial, Keth agreed. But the alternative is the war that Zarn was trying to orchestrate, a war that would cost millions of lives on both sides. Marcus looked at Lyra, and through their bond he felt her certainty. This was why they had been brought together. Not for espionage or military advantage, but to create something new, something that could change the future for both their species. We accept, they said in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. And in that moment, Marcus realized that the rescue mission that had started all of this might have been based on false memories and manufactured urgency, but the feelings that had driven him were absolutely real. He had risked everything to save a stranger, and in doing so, he had found his purpose in life. The war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire was about to end. And it would be replaced by something far more interesting. 6 months after the revelation at Haven 7, Marcus and Liara stood on the observation deck of their new ship, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on the first joint human Zephyrian space station. The massive structure hung in the void like a crystalline flower, its hybrid architecture combining the flowing organic curves of Zephyrian design with the angular efficiency of human engineering. It's beautiful, Marcus said, though the words seemed inadequate for what they were witnessing. Through their bond, he could feel Liara's satisfaction and pride mixing with his own emotions to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. It is a beginning, Liara replied, her voice carrying the faint accent that he had grown to love. Though I suspect neither of our species fully understands what they have committed to building. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic negotiations, public appearances, and careful relationship building between two species that had been at war for over a decade. Marcus and Liara had become the public face of the new cooperation treaty, traveling between human and Zephyrian worlds to explain the benefits of the alliance and address concerns from both sides. It hadn't been easy. The human media had initially portrayed Marcus as either a traitor who had been seduced by an alien spy or a hero who had sacrificed his humanity for the greater good. The Zephyrian press had been even less kind, suggesting that Liara had polluted her noble bloodline by bonding with a primitive human warrior. But gradually, as the benefits of cooperation became apparent, public opinion had begun to shift. Joint scientific projects had yielded breakthrough discoveries in propulsion technology and medical research. Trade agreements had brought prosperity to worlds on both sides of the former battle lines. Most importantly, the constant threat of war that had hung over both species for years had finally lifted. "Ambassador Chen, Ambassador Vex," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Dr. Sarah Kim, Marcus's former lieutenant, who had been promoted to captain and assigned as their military liaison. "The delegation from Proxima Station has arrived. They're ready for the final inspection." Marcus nodded, straightening the formal jacket of his new diplomatic uniform. The outfit was a compromise between human and Zephyrian fashion, practical enough for human taste but elegant enough to meet Zephyrian standards. Liara wore a similar outfit in complementary colors, and together they looked like what they had become, a new type of being that belonged equally to both species. The inspection tour took them through every level of the station, from the diplomatic quarters at the top to the engineering sections at the bottom. Each area had been designed to accommodate both human and Zephyrian physiology, with adjustable environmental controls and furnishings that could adapt to the needs of either species. The medical bay is particularly impressive, Dr. Vasquez, who had been assigned as the station's chief medical officer, told them as they walked through the fully equipped hospital complex. "We've combined human and Zephyrian medical technologies to create treatment options that wouldn't be available to either species alone." "And the bonding research?" Liara asked. Dr. Vasquez's expression grew excited. "That's where things get really interesting. We've identified 17 human Zephyrian couples who have successfully completed the bonding process in the past 6 months. Each bond seems to be unique, but they all share certain characteristics: enhanced telepathic communication, synchronized lifespans. 17 couples," Marcus repeated, feeling a sense of wonder through his bond with Liara. When their relationship had first become public, they had assumed they were an isolated anomaly. The discovery that other humans and Zephyrians were capable of forming similar bonds had changed everything. "The implications for both species are staggering," Dr. Vasquez continued. "We're talking about the potential for a new branch of human evolution, one that incorporates the best traits of both species. Enhanced intelligence, improved physical capabilities, natural immunity to diseases that affect baseline humans and Zephyrians." "And the children?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer through Liara's growing excitement. "The preliminary genetic analyses suggest that bonded couples should be capable of having children that are truly hybrid, not just half human and half Zephyrian, but something entirely new. We're calling them synthetics for now, though I suspect they'll choose their own name when they're old enough." The tour concluded in the station's central hub, a vast spherical chamber that served as both a meeting space and a symbol of the cooperation between the two species. Representatives from both governments were gathered there, along with the crews that had built the station and the families of the bonded couples who would be working there. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored Zephyrians," High Magistrate Keth began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Today marks the beginning of a new era in the relationship between our peoples." Admiral Harrison, who had been surprisingly supportive of the new alliance once he understood its implications, stepped forward to address the assembled crowd. 6 months ago, Captain Chen's rescue mission seemed like an act of insubordination that would damage relations between our species. Today, we recognize it as the first step toward a partnership that will benefit both humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. Marcus felt a wave of pride and vindication, though it was tempered by the knowledge of how much work lay ahead. The station was just the beginning, a proof of concept for the larger vision that he and Liara had been developing. "The Harmony Station," Lyra addressed the crowd, using the name that had been chosen through a joint vote of both species, "represents more than just cooperation between our governments. It represents the possibility of true unity between our peoples." She gestured toward the viewport that dominated one wall of the chamber, showing the starfield beyond. "For too long, both humans and Zephyrians have seen space as a battlefield to be conquered. Today, we choose to see it as a garden to be cultivated." The formal ceremonies continued for another hour, but Marcus found his attention drifting toward the future. Through his bond with Liara, he could sense her thoughts turning in the same direction. The station was impressive, but it was only the first step in a much larger plan. Later that evening, in their private quarters aboard the station, Marcus and Lyra sat together reviewing reports from the various joint projects that were already underway. The bond between them had evolved over the months, becoming less intrusive and more natural. They could share thoughts and emotions when they chose to, but they had also learned to maintain their individual privacy when needed. The terraforming project on Kepler 442b is ahead of schedule, Marcus reported, reading from his tablet. The combination of human engineering and Zephyrian biotechnology is proving more effective than either approach alone. And the cultural exchange programs are showing remarkable success, Liara added. Human children who spend time in Zephyrian educational systems are developing enhanced problem-solving abilities, while Zephyrian children in human schools are learning to think more creatively. Marcus set down his tablet and looked out at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Zarn's plan had worked? If the bond had been used for espionage instead of diplomacy? Liara followed his gaze to the viewport. I think about it often. The war would have continued, perhaps escalated to the point where both species destroyed each other. Instead, she gestured toward the station around them, instead we have this. Do you have any regrets, Marcus asked quietly, about giving up your military career, your life among your own people? Lyra smiled, and through their bond Marcus felt the depth of her contentment. My life among my people was one of duty and honor, but it was also one of isolation. I was respected but never truly understood. Here, with you, I am part of something larger than myself. Even if it means being caught between two species that don't always understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Especially because of that, Liara replied firmly.
We are proof that the barriers between species are not as permanent as either side believed. Every bonded couple that follows us makes that proof stronger. A chime from the communication system interrupted their conversation. The face of Captain Reynolds, Marcus's former colleague, appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but excited. Marcus, Liara, I thought you'd want to know. We've just received confirmation from the Centauri expedition. They've made contact with a third species, the Vexi. Apparently they've been watching both humans and Zephyrians for decades, waiting to see if we could evolve beyond constant warfare. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Are they hostile? Just the opposite, Reynolds replied. They're impressed by what you two have accomplished. They want to open diplomatic relations with the Human-Zephyrian alliance. After Reynolds signed off, Marcus and Lyra sat in stunned silence. The idea that their relationship had caught the attention of other alien species added entirely new dimension to what they were building. 3 species working together, Liara mused. The possibilities are infinite, Marcus finished. Through their bond, he could feel her excitement mixing with his own, creating a sense of anticipation that was almost overwhelming. They stood together at the viewport, watching as ships from both species moved around the station like schools of fish performing an intricate dance. Somewhere out there, other bonded couples were building their own relationships, creating their own bridges between species. And beyond that, an entirely new form of life was taking shape, one that would inherit the best of humanity, the best of Zephyrian civilization, and something entirely unique. You know what this means, Marcus said quietly. Liara nodded, her hand finding his. It means our children won't just be hybrids of 2 species. They'll be citizens of a galactic community we can't even imagine yet. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? Liara turned to face him, her blue eyes bright with determination and love. Are you asking me if I'm ready to help create the future? Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of their bond strengthening the connection between them. I'm asking if you're ready to change the galaxy. With you? Lyra's smile matched his own. Always. As if summoned by their words, Dr. Vasquez's voice came over the medical bay's emergency channel, ambassadors to medical immediately. We have news about the hybrid pregnancy research. Marcus and Lyra looked at each other, and through their bond they both felt the same realization. The future wasn't just coming, it was already here. And they were about to become parents to the first generation of galactic citizens. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the nursery of Harmony Station, watching his daughter sleep in her specially designed crib. At 6 months old, Arya Chenvex was already showing signs of the unique heritage that made her the first true hybrid of human and Zephyrian genetics. Her skin had the pale blue tint of her mother's people, but her eyes were the warm brown of her father's. More remarkably, she seemed to instinctively understand both human emotional expressions and Zephyrian communication patterns. She's dreaming, Liara said softly, joining him at the crib. Through their bond, Marcus could feel his wife's wonder and protective love mixing with his own emotions. I can sense the patterns of her thoughts. She's processing the new language module that Dr. Vasquez introduced yesterday. Marcus reached down to gently touch his daughter's tiny hand, marveling at how perfectly human and Zephyrian features had combined in her. Is it normal for babies to dream about language acquisition? Nothing about our daughter's normal, Liara replied with a smile. According to the developmental scans, her neural growth is proceeding at twice the expected rate for either species. Dr. Vasquez thinks she'll be speaking in complete sentences before her first birthday. The past 2 years had been a time of unprecedented growth for the Human-Zephyrian alliance. What had started as a desperate attempt to prevent war had evolved into something that neither species had anticipated, a genuine partnership that was changing both civilizations from the ground up. The Harmony Station had become the center of a growing network of joint facilities throughout both territories. Scientific collaboration had yielded breakthroughs in everything from faster-than-light travel to medical nanotechnology. Cultural exchange programs had created a generation of humans and Zephyrians who saw each other as partners rather than potential enemies. Most remarkably, the number of human-Zephyrian bonded pairs had grown to over 200, with more forming every month. Each bond was unique, but they all shared the same fundamental characteristics that Marcus and Lyra had discovered: enhanced empathy, shared knowledge, and the ability to produce hybrid children who represented the best of both species. Ambassador Chen, Ambassador Vex, came a familiar voice from the nursery's entrance. Captain Kim, who had been promoted to admiral and assigned as the military coordinator for the Alliance, entered with her usual efficient purposefulness. I apologize for interrupting, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Marcus felt Liara's instant concern through their bond, along with his own spike of anxiety. In the 2 years since the alliance had been established, they had faced numerous challenges: political opposition from hardliners on both sides, technical difficulties with joint projects, and the ongoing complexity of merging two very different civilizations. But the tone in Admiral Kim's voice suggested something more serious. "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked, automatically shifting into the diplomatic mode that had become second nature. "The kind that could reshape the entire political structure of this sector," Kim replied grimly. "We've received a formal request from the Vex High Confederation for full membership in the Alliance." Marcus felt his eyebrows rise. The Vex High had been cautious allies since first making contact a year ago, offering scientific knowledge and trade opportunities but remaining politically independent. For them to request full membership was unprecedented. "And that's a problem because?" Lyra asked, though through their bond, Marcus could sense that she already suspected the answer. "Because they're not the only ones," Kim continued. "In the past week, we've received similar requests from the Andromedans, the silicon-based entities from the Tau Ceti system, and something calling itself the Collective Mind of the Outer Rim. Everyone wants to join what we're building here." Marcus sank into one of the nursery's chairs, feeling the weight of implications settling on his shoulders. When he had made the decision to rescue Liara, he had been thinking about saving one person from torture and death. The idea that his actions would eventually lead to the formation of a galactic federation was almost too large to comprehend. "How many species are we talking about?" he asked. 17 confirmed requests, with at least 6 more expressing preliminary interest, Kim replied. "The xenobiology department is going crazy trying to figure out how to accommodate the different physiological requirements. And the legal team is having nervous breakdowns trying to draft membership agreements for species that don't even communicate through language." Through their bond, Marcus felt Liara's excitement mixing with his own sense of overwhelming responsibility. They had become the de facto leaders of something that was growing far beyond their ability to control or even understand. "What does the Council recommend?" Lara asked, referring to the joint governing body that had been established to manage Alliance affairs. "The Council is split," Kim admitted. "The Progressives want to accept everyone who meets basic compatibility requirements. The Conservatives think we're expanding too fast and should consolidate what we have before taking on new members. And the Pragmatists are worried about the military implications of a 17-species alliance." Marcus looked down at his sleeping daughter, and suddenly the future seemed both more promising and more terrifying than ever. Arya would grow up in a galaxy where multiple species worked together as equals, where the concept of interspecies war was becoming obsolete. But she would also inherit the responsibility of managing relationships between civilizations that might have fundamentally different concepts of existence itself. "There's something else," Kim continued hesitantly. "The hybrid research program has yielded some unexpected results." "What kind of results?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Vasquez has been analyzing the genetic patterns of all the bonded couple's children. She's discovered that the hybrid traits aren't random. They're specifically designed to facilitate communication and cooperation between species." It's as if the bonding process is creating children who are naturally gifted at interspecies diplomacy. Liara moved to stand beside Marcus's chair, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Through their bond, he could feel her processing the same realization that was dawning on him. "You're saying that our children aren't just hybrids," Lyra said slowly. "They're being specifically adapted to serve as bridges between species." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Kim confirmed. "Every hybrid child tested so far shows enhanced empathy, intuitive understanding of alien psychology, and the ability to communicate across species barriers that would be impossible for baseline humans or Zephyrians." Marcus stood up and walked to the viewport that dominated one wall of the nursery. Outside, he could see ships from a dozen different species docked at the station's various ports. The sight that had once seemed impossible was now becoming routine. "Evolution in action," he murmured. More than that, Liara joined him at the viewport. "Directed evolution. The bond between us didn't just create a diplomatic alliance. It started a biological process that's designed to create a truly integrated galactic community." The implications were staggering. If the bonding process was creating children specifically adapted for interspecies cooperation, then humanity and the Zephyrian Empire weren't just forming an alliance. They were evolving into something new, something that could serve as the foundation for a galactic civilization. "What do we tell the Council?" Marcus asked. "We tell them the truth," Liara replied firmly, "that what we're building here is bigger than either of our species imagined. That our children represent the first step toward a truly universal form of consciousness that can encompass any number of species." Admiral Kim was studying them both with growing amazement. "Are you seriously suggesting that we accept membership applications from 17 different alien species?" Marcus and Liara looked at each other, and through their bond they shared a moment of perfect understanding. The future that was unfolding before them was chaotic and uncertain, but it was also filled with possibilities that no single species could achieve alone. "We're suggesting," Marcus said carefully, "that we stop thinking like humans or Zephyrians and start thinking like galactic citizens. The infrastructure alone," Kim protested, "will be built by 17 species working together instead of 2, Liara pointed out. "Each species contributes what they do best, and everyone benefits from the combined knowledge." "And if it doesn't work?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, who had woken up and was watching them with the alert intelligence that characterized all the hybrid children. "Then at least we'll have tried to build something better than what we inherited." Vasquez's voice suddenly crackled over the intercom. "Ambassadors to the medical bay immediately. We have visitors, and you're going to want to see this." When they arrived at the medical bay, they found Dr. Vasquez standing beside 3 beings unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. One appeared to be made entirely of crystalline formations that pulsed with internal light. Another was a flowing semi-liquid entity that maintained a roughly humanoid shape through what seemed to be pure will. The third was clearly mechanical, but with an elegant design that suggested genuine artificial consciousness rather than simple programming. "Ambassadors Chen and Vex," Dr. Vasquez said formally, "I'd like you to meet the representatives of the Gestalt Alliance, a confederation of 12 species from the Andromeda galaxy." The crystalline being pulsed brighter, and somehow Marcus found that he could understand its communication directly. The integration of biological species through bonding protocols is remarkable. The liquid entity flowed into a different configuration, and its thoughts appeared directly in Marcus's mind. "We offer ourselves as subjects for your bonding experiments. Our species has long sought a way to form permanent connections with other forms of consciousness." The mechanical being's voice was melodious and perfectly modulated. "Our analysis indicates that the hybrid children produced by your bonding process will be capable of interfacing with any form of consciousness, biological, mechanical, or energy-based. We wish to contribute to this development." Marcus felt Lyra's excitement through their bond, along with a deep sense of purpose that seemed to come from somewhere beyond either of their individual consciousness. They weren't just building an alliance anymore. They were facilitating the birth of a new form of existence that could encompass every possible type of consciousness in the universe. "The bonding process is voluntary and irreversible," Liara explained to the alien representatives. "Are your species prepared for permanent integration with beings unlike yourselves?" The 3 entities responded simultaneously, their different forms of communication creating a harmony that was surprisingly beautiful. "We have been waiting for this opportunity for millennia, the chance to transcend the isolation of individual consciousness and become part of something greater." 6 months later, Marcus and Liara stood on the observation deck of what was now called Unity Station, watching as the largest construction project in galactic history took shape around them. The station had grown into a massive complex that could accommodate beings with radically different environmental needs, from the methane-breathing titans of the Outer Rim to the pure energy entities that existed in the electromagnetic spectrum. Arya was sitting in her specialized chair, babbling happily in what Dr. Vasquez had identified as a mixture of human, Zephyrian, and at least 3 other alien languages. At 1 year old, she could communicate basic concepts with any of the station's resident species, and her neural development continued to astound the research teams. She's not just learning languages, Dr. Vasquez had explained during their last meeting. She's developing entirely new neural pathways that allow her to process information the way each species thinks. When she communicates with the Vexahai, her brain literally reconfigures itself to match their collective consciousness patterns. More remarkably, all of the hybrid children were showing similar adaptations. The second generation, as they were being called, represented a form of life that was specifically designed to serve as universal translators between any form of consciousness that might exist. "The council meeting is in an hour," Liara reminded him, though her tone was relaxed rather than urgent. They had learned to approach the growing complexity of their responsibilities with calm acceptance rather than panic. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on something else entirely. Through the viewport, he could see the construction of what would become the first interstellar nursery, a facility designed specifically for hybrid children from multiple species combinations. Human Zephyrian children like Arya would grow up alongside Vexhai Andromedan hybrids, mechanical biological consciousness mergers, and combinations that didn't even have names yet. "Do you ever miss the simple days?" he asked Liara. "When it was just humans and Zephyrians trying to figure out how to coexist?" Liara laughed, a sound that carried harmonics from her alien heritage, but warmth from their shared experiences. "You mean the days when you were facing court-martial for treason and I was considered a security risk by my own government?" "Those were simpler times," Marcus insisted with a grin. "Perhaps," Liara agreed, settling into the chair beside him. "But they were also smaller times. What we have now," she gestured toward the vista outside the viewport, where dozens of different ship designs moved in careful coordination around the growing station complex. "What we have now is infinite possibility." Through their bond, Marcus felt the truth of her words. The challenges they faced now were vast and complex. Managing relationships between species that might not even exist in the same dimensions, facilitating communication between forms of consciousness that had never encountered each other before, ensuring that the rapid expansion of the Alliance didn't collapse under its own weight. But those challenges came with opportunities that no previous generation had ever imagined. Disease was becoming obsolete as medical knowledge from dozens of species was combined into universal treatments. The energy and resource limitations that had driven conflict between human and Zephyrian worlds were being solved through cooperation with species that had mastered different aspects of physics and engineering. Most importantly, the fear and isolation that had characterized both their species for centuries was being replaced by a sense of belonging to something greater. "Mama, Papa," Arya's voice interrupted his thoughts, her words a perfect blend of human and Zephyrian pronunciation. "Ship coming." Marcus looked where his daughter was pointing and saw a vessel unlike any in their databases, a massive, organic-looking craft that seemed to be grown rather than built. As they watched, it approached the station with movements that suggested genuine life rather than mechanical propulsion. "That's not on the scheduled arrivals list," Liara observed, accessing the station's traffic control system through her neural interface. Before Marcus could respond, the communication system activated, and a voice filled the observation deck, not coming from speakers, but seeming to originate from the air itself. "Greetings, builders of the new paradigm," the voice said, carrying harmonics that suggested vast intelligence and immeasurable age. "We are the shepherds, and we have been waiting for you to grow into what you are becoming." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense her same mixture of awe and apprehension. "Who are the shepherds?" Lyra asked aloud. "We are what you are becoming," the voice replied. "A collective consciousness that emerged from the bonding of multiple species across this galaxy millions of years ago. We have watched countless civilizations rise and fall, waiting for one to develop the capacity for true universal integration. The implications were staggering." Marcus grabbed Liara's hand, feeling the need for physical contact as his understanding of their situation expanded beyond anything he had previously imagined. "You're saying that this has happened before?" he managed. "Many times. Across many galaxies," the shepherds replied. "But never with such rapid success. Most species require thousands of years to develop bonding capabilities. Your alliance achieved full integration in less than 3 years." Arya suddenly stood up in her chair, her young face serious with an expression that seemed far too mature for her age. "They want to help," she said simply. "They have children too." Through the viewport, Marcus could see the organic ship extending what appeared to be docking appendages toward the station. But rather than connecting to the normal ports, it was creating new interface points that seemed to grow out of the station's hull itself. "The next phase of your development requires guidance," the shepherds continued. "Your hybrid children represent the first generation of truly universal consciousness in this galaxy, but they will need teachers who understand the full scope of what they can become." Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ambassadors, you need to see this. The ship that just docked, it's not just making physical contact with the station. It's integrating with our computer systems, our life support, even our consciousness interface networks." Marcus and Liara exchanged a look that carried years of shared experience and absolute trust. Whatever was happening, they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that first desperate rescue mission. "Are you ready for the next step?" the shepherds asked, and somehow Marcus knew they were addressing not just him and Liara, but every consciousness on the station, human, Zephyrian, hybrid, and alien alike. Marcus looked at his daughter, who was watching the proceedings with calm curiosity rather than fear. He thought about the journey that had brought them to this point, from a single act of compassion to the foundation of a galactic civilization, and he realized that the rescue mission that had started it all had never really ended. They were still rescuing people, still building bridges, still choosing hope over fear. "We're ready," he said, speaking for himself, for Liara, for their daughter, and for every being who had chosen to become part of something greater than themselves. The shepherd's response came not as words, but as a wave of pure understanding that flowed through the bond between Marcus and Lyra and expanded to encompass every consciousness on the station. In that moment, he saw the true scope of what they were building, not just an alliance of species, but a new form of existence that could encompass any type of consciousness that might ever emerge. The rescue mission that had brought him and Lyra together had been the beginning of something that would echo through the galaxy for millions of years. Their daughter and the other hybrid children would grow up to become teachers and guides for civilizations that hadn't even evolved yet. The alliance they had helped create would serve as a template for integration that could be repeated across the universe, and somewhere, in a galaxy they would never see, other beings would face the same choice that Marcus had faced on the bridge of his ship, whether to risk everything for a stranger, whether to choose compassion over caution, whether to build bridges instead of walls. Marcus smiled and pulled Liara closer, their daughter laughing with pure joy as the shepherd ship completed its integration with Unity Station. The future was vast and uncertain and beautiful, and they would meet it together, not as humans or Zephyrians or any single species, but as citizens of the cosmos itself.
The rescue was complete. The real adventure was just beginning.